Welcome back to the 22nd Shelton Leadership Forum. I have the honor of introducing a remarkable values-based leader who will facilitate our next session. He continues to lead with an emphasis on increasing scholarships and fellowships, strengthening our faculty and their research, and extending educational opportunities to tens of thousands of students. It has been an honor to work under his leadership since 2010. The Shelton Leadership Center directs the Chancellor's Leadership Development Program that serves first-generation and rural students attending NC State. Through this program, I've had the opportunity to observe his leadership, passion, and care for our students. He is the prime example of our slogan, Think and Do, raising over $2.5 billion in support of scholarships and programs for our university. He continues to lead by example as he faces challenges boldly, positively, and with humility. He is joined by 4 amazing leaders in our community who have all experienced the impact resilience lends to leadership. At this time, please join me in welcoming our Chancellor, Dr. Randy Woodson, who is our leader of the pack, as well as our distinguished guests.
Thank you, Debbie, for your inspiring words and for your unwavering commitment and leadership within the Shelton Leadership Center at NC State. You know, the Shelton Leadership Center is more than a symbol of excellence. It's a vital resource for the NC State community and beyond that strives to fortify, hone, and translate leadership skills into tangible results. We hold in such high regard the essential programs that the center brings to life, programs like the Shelton Leadership Forum, the Chancellor's Leadership Development Program, the Shelton Scholars, and the Shelton Challenge. These initiatives do more than offer leadership development opportunities. They open doors to students at NC State and extend their reach to high school students, college students, business professionals all across North Carolina. Guided by the mission of developing values-based leaders, the Shelton Leadership Center ensures that leadership is rooted in principles and integrity. The theme of this year's Shelton Forum is resilient leadership, a theme that resonates profoundly in today's complex world where leaders frequently face unforeseen challenges. The ability to adapt positively to obstacles is not only essential, but it defines truly effective leadership. You know, this has been such a challenging time to lead a university during COVID and the pandemic and our students coming back together for the first time in over 2 years. We've had to be resilient and thoughtful about how we bring students back together. So I've experienced some of the greatest challenges in resiliency in both my own leadership and trying to get our students to understand coping skills and how to be resilient. So I can relate to this personally and professionally. You know, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Chancellor's Roundtable discussion several really important guests today that will bring insight on what it means to be a resilient leader. And I'm honored to introduce our guests, all of whom are proud alumni of NC State with a Carolina grad in here as well. First, Dr. Sheronda Witter is a senior advisor to out-of-school time partnerships at STEM Next Opportunity Fund. As an advocate for high-quality out-of-school opportunities for all, her passion lies in positive youth leadership development and creating learning environments that allow students to foster their own resilience. Next, we have Kritsine Sloane. Kritsine is the Executive Director at Leadership Triangle. In that role, she helps leaders throughout the Triangle work across boundaries to find common ground, to better address community challenges and create significant social change. Kritsine is an expert in organizational design, group facilitation, understanding and working within oppositional values and equity-centered leadership. Welcome, Kritsine. Next, it's Patrick Imbasciani. Did I get it right, Patrick?
You got it right, Chancellor.
Man, I've been working on it. He's a former U.S. Marine, an international business leader, and we're really fortunate to have him with us today. Throughout his military service and his tenure in various C-suite positions, Patrick has consistently confronted and effectively addressed challenges, whether they be a professional or of a personal nature. With a passion for innovation and lighthearted sense of humor, which I've experienced today, and this too shall pass mentality, which I've also experienced today, and a mentality toward addressing life's obstacles. Patrick strives to inspire others and leave a lasting impact on the organizations and individuals he serves. So welcome, Patrick. And finally, Candace Webb. Candace is admittedly a Carolina grad, and she's very proud of that, as am I, but she also came to NC State to get her master's degree. And so we're proud of both her degrees from great UNC system campuses. She's a senior learning and development specialist at SAS, and as a Gallup certified strength coach, Candace is an expert at helping students and professionals lean into their strengths and build resiliency for personal and professional success. Over her career, Candace has served and coached hundreds of students, professionals, and leaders and teams in both nonprofit and for-profit organizations. So welcome back to the PAC, Candace. We've had a little offline conversation today about our relationships at our two great universities, but it's all out of pure love. So your experience and insights are a testament to the legacy of leadership that continues to thrive within our community. So I have several questions to guide our discussion today. The first question I have is, do you believe as a leader you can both be resilient and vulnerable? And what does this look like for you? Sheronda, why don't you kick us off today?
Absolutely, Chancellor. And the answer to the question is yes. In fact, I think that a leader must be vulnerable and resilient. I think vulnerability, a part of that is being honest and open with the teams that you're leading, being honest with yourselves. I think one way to do it that's easy if you're not comfortable being vulnerable is to share your why. Sharing your why as to why you've entered the work that you're in, sharing that with your teams and learning from your teams as to what their whys are. For me, I am serving in youth development. I've fell into this field unintentionally, and my why is the students. The students that I've served ever since the time that I was 19 years old at Furman University as a freshman in college. And the other students that I've met along my career trajectory reinforce my why for the work that I do, now serving at the national level and serving our students in our field nationwide. And then as far as resilience, I think that the reality is there are going to be unforeseen challenges, as you shared in the opening, that we overcome and that we experience and encounter. And it's important that we rise to those challenges and rise to those unforeseen experiences as a team, as an individual, leading teams. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be both resilient and vulnerable.
Well, that's great lessons in your answers. And when I think about leading, if your team doesn't see you as being vulnerable, it's hard for them to follow you because they don't, I mean, it brings out the humanity in all of us as leaders. So Kritsine, the next question, in what ways has the concept of resilience evolved in your thinking over the years and the approach to your leadership over the course of your career?
When I was younger, I used to think a lot about resilience in terms of an individual capacity. Like, it's on me to be resilient. Now, as I've grown in my leadership and over my career, I really think about how can I create systems and structures where the people around me, the people I'm leading, don't necessarily have to be so resilient. I think there's a lot we can do in the way that we design our workplaces where we're not asking people to just always have to show up with resilience. I'll give you a specific example. So I, a new mom, just had my daughter 9 months ago, and it's made me think a lot about working parents. And especially as an executive leader who needs to show up, well at work, who needs to be emotionally whole and stable and, present for my team, I think there's a lot of things we could do at the federal level, the local level, the state level, in our communities to better support working parents as they show up in the workplace. So I think it for me has shifted in that, yes, I think it's a personal capability that we all need to exercise, but I also think, who do we always ask to be resilient and why?
That's a great answer, Kritsine. I'd like to add on to that. As I think about how I understood resilience early in my career, I always thought of it as something you either have or you don't. You're either resilient or you're not. And what I've come to learn over time is that, like any other skill, we can develop resilience. We can develop it through our experiences, through our own reflection and intentionality, even in courses that we can take. And so for me, that's been very empowering to know that the level of resilience I have right now isn't where I have to stay. I can learn to be more and more resilient with practice.
Patrick, how do you balance being resilient and adapting to change without compromising your core values or the mission of the organization you lead?
That's a good question. I've always thought about core values and mission sort of as a sun and stars, right? Particularly the North Star, because they're integral to what you believe and to where you're going. Change, I see more or less like clouds that are going to occasionally come in and cloud your view of the sky, right? So it's important to know what your core value is, what your beliefs are, and where you're heading. You're going to have to adapt to change. Sometimes it's a pause. Sometimes it's going to be longer. You might have to deal with things, for a season. The key is, if those core beliefs that you have and you understand the mission of the organization well enough, that when the clouds pass, and they always will, you'll be able to get back on path if you know where you're heading to begin with.
So Candace, tell us about a time, personal or professional, when you had to be resilient, and how this experience, how did it influence how you now lead yourself and teams that you might be leading at your organization?
Good question. I can think of many times when there have been changes around me and I've had to adapt and be resilient. I'll mention just one professional experience, and it's one that's common to probably most of us. I used to work in higher education, and of course, when COVID hit, we all had to pivot. We all had to adapt. And the program and the team that I was leading was very high touch, and it really depended on students being able to engage one-on-one with their faculty. And so when we no longer had the ability to do that in the way that we become accustomed to doing it, we had to pivot, and we had to do it quickly. And not only that, we had a lot of eyes on us. It was a pretty big program that we were leading. And so in the moment, it was really difficult to figure out where to go next. What do I do? And so what I did and what I learned is that I don't have to go through the resilience process by myself. So what I did was I tried to engage other people around me, help me think through what our options are, help us think through what the best option is going to be. And from there, we were able to come up with a really good result. And again, what I learned from that is that there's a community around me, and that they, just like me, want me to be resilient and successful. All I have to do is reach out to them.
That's a great lesson, and community is so important in organizations, and building community and having it sustain you through periods where everyone needs to be resilient is a good lesson for all of us. Anyone else want to add on?
Yes, I can chime in. So my experience, I'll talk about when I was at NC State as a doctoral student in the College of Ed, and I had completed the first 3 chapters of my dissertation, and I had completed IRB. I had defended with my committee successfully. And then as I was getting ready to conduct my research, there were a lot of changes at the entity where I was going to conduct said research. And so the changes kind of affected the validity of the study. And I faced a very tough decision of scrapping it and starting completely over from page 1, chapter 1, or not graduating with my doctorate. And at that time, I completed all of my coursework. So literally, I was ABD, all but dissertation. And I took a week. I gave myself the time to grieve that, because that was a loss of time, a huge investment of myself, lots of work that went into that, and also investments from my community, my village, reflecting on what Candace shared. And so I gave myself that week, and then I remembered my why for going into the doctoral program, and it's because I promised my grandmother prior to her passing away that I would become a doctor. And so I, gave myself the time. And then I said, we gotta figure this out. I have to finish this, and I have to finish strong. And so I pursued an entirely different topic, and I started back at page 1, chapter 1, and I am a doctor as of 2019. And so that example for me kind of really demonstrates how I tapped into, I guess, my inner resilience, my why, reflecting on the first question, and then also really tapped into my support system and the village that was there to support me and to give me the space to feel those very real emotions after the loss of that investment of time, effort, and energy.
Well, that I can only imagine what that week was like for you. But again, going back to the Patrick's comment about the North Star, you went back to why, and that's an important lesson. How do you measure the success of resilience in leadership, both at the individual and organizational levels? Kritsine, would you like to tackle that?
Sure.
I'm kind of throwing it your way.
Yeah. I'll pick it up. I think I'll start at the organizational level. I think you build systems where there's slack, right? If your team is stretched at capacity all of the time, when something comes to you that's unexpected, you don't have the space to pick it up, right? There's more opportunity for that to break. So I think part of building resilience in the organizational level is, what's the 10% of slack that we give where we're not fully stretched, where we can take on those last minute challenges and still meet, to Patrick's point, our mission, right? Where we don't go too far off course. I think that's what resilience can look like systemically. And I kind of think it's the same for individuals, right? So if you're fully tapped all the time, it's going to be really hard for you if a giant curveball comes your way. And so for me, I have become somewhat allergic to saying I'm busy all the time. Because as a leader, if I'm busy all the time, I'm not doing my job. Like I can't be thinking creatively, I can't be thinking expansively, I can't be showing up for people well. And so what resilience, building that practice of resilience has looked like in my life is learning how to say no, learning what's important, figuring out my priorities, and making sure that I do have the space to take on those unexpected challenges because it's my job.
Anyone else want to? Yes.
Well, that
Patrick.
just made me think, going back to the last question about the challenges that we'll have in our personal life, and then how do you come out of that, and how does that change you as a leader? A couple of years ago, 4th of July weekend, I was having a little daddy-daughter time with my then 11-year-old. We were at the pool. She gets out of the pool. She says, "Dad, my neck hurts and my head hurts." She sits down and she gets sick. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I mean, time of COVID, you're thinking, well, maybe she caught something at camp or whatnot. Come to find out, a few ER visits later, a CAT scan, and she had a brain bleed. And this is a perfectly healthy, happy kid, and personally, what happens is your line between profession and personal splits. And so we went about what ultimately has been a 2-year journey. She is fantastic today, by the way. She is in 8th grade. Her hair is growing long. She is playing her first soccer game at school with her school team today. So she's doing great, but it changes you, or it ought to, as a leader. And I would think that, one way that changed me is that now I try to lead with more grace, right? And so what that means at work is you look at your staff, you look at the people that are around you, and I'm the last person that's gonna go and dock somebody in paper. I'll have a conversation with them and find out, because there might be something going on in their personal life before you go to performance, right? And just kind of talk with them and see what that means. Personally, I lead a little bit more with grace at home. I know that that's leading to some extended bedtimes, probably, and that's okay, right? Because at this point, I value the extra time.
Well, we started the conversation today with the question of vulnerability and resilience, and I think all of us understand that to be a leader and to exhibit resilience, you also have to show humanity and vulnerability. And thank you for sharing that with us today. As we think about organizational culture, what role does the culture of any organization play in fostering resilience? And how have each of you contributed to creating and shaping that culture within the organizations that you lead? Candace?
Yeah, I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to create a culture that fosters resilience. And there are small things that we can do as leaders. One of the best ways we can foster resilience is to demonstrate it ourselves, to model resilience. When a change comes, if I don't know what to do or I'm not sure which way to go, it's actually okay to say that. And to say to my team, you know what, this change came at us, we're not really sure where to go, but together we're going to figure it out. And that demonstration of resilience to my team gives them permission to be resilient as well. And I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to create that kind of culture within our organizations.
Can you, and I'm going to give you all a chance to opine on this issue, but within the culture of an organization, can you build a culture of resilience?
I'd say yes. I mean, when you think about our nation's elite fighting teams, right, from the beginning, they're anticipating that things are going to go wrong, and so they introduce elements of chaos into your training. In the Marines, we call it the fog of war, right, where you're going down a planned path, and then something unexpected happens, and then you have a different objective that you have to achieve, and you may or may not have all of the tools that you need in order to achieve that. So they, from the very beginning, build it in so much so that it becomes sort of a punchline. We call that a snafu, situation normal, all fouled.
I suspect Marines have a more, interesting term, but I'm with snafu.
That's right. We'll say fouled up here. It's a different term, but we expect that things are going to be fouled up.
Yeah.
And then you still have to achieve the mission, right? You still have to accomplish the goal, and that's true in any leadership role that I've had in the private sector. It goes back to what Candace was saying about being transparent and open and having good communication with the teams, letting them know it's okay to foul up. And I think if you create that culturally within your organization, people will bring you the challenges, and they won't fear what that looks like on the other side, and you can work together to get there.
That's a great point.
And I also like to add, I think it's about how you define resilience. So for me, resilience is acknowledging that you're going to have losses and you're going to have gains, right? No matter what, any unforeseen challenge that you're going to overcome or experience or encounter, you're going to have some things that you lose, and then you're going to have some things that you gain. And so when you set up that dynamic within your organization and you acknowledge that, hey, we're going to lose some things, whether it's time, investment, whatever, like, it's okay. We can get through that. We can grow through that experience, and we can overcome it as long as we're together on the other side. And so I think it's all about how you frame resilience within your teams.
That's great. Anyone else before I move on?
I would just say, I think there's also, if you can build a culture of experimentation, you can start to build a culture of resilience. So if your organization is used to running experiments, used to, there's a practice that we train on called looping, where you make a proposal, you do an experiment, and then you practice and learn to say, what did we learn from this together? And then you go through the whole thing again. If that becomes like a rhythm with your team, that practice of experimentation, I think that is powerful because it gives people multiple opportunities where they're probably going to fail, and then somewhere they're going to succeed, and they're still going to see that the work continues.
Well, that's a great example. Patrick, I'm going to start this question with you, but having listened to all of you for a while now today, I know that you all have experienced failure in some form in your lives. So recognizing that some of our greatest lessons come from failure, can you talk a bit about a time in your professional life or your personal life when failure has really taught you lessons of resilience, and how you've incorporated that into your personal and your work environment now? So how have you learned from those experiences?
Well, a proud wolf packer.
Yeah.
I didn't make it in the first time or the second time. but 3 was a charm. And so, you know, through that process of coming down as a New Yorker and going and applying to NC State thinking that I would just get right in with my 1 year of State University of New York Cobleskill, which is a great institution, by the way, under my belt, the registrar had a different thought process, and I didn't quite make it. So then I thought, well, I'll just be determined and persistent. And I went across to Wake Tech and I started taking some classes, and I came back again and said, haha, how about now? And they, you know, they didn't say this then, but they probably said something to the effect, well, you're getting closer, Yankee, but not quite there yet. So I had to tuck my tail between my legs and go back to the land of I told you so, to my friends and family, and who said, you should finish up here before you go down there. And that taught me that, you know, persistence is great, but sometimes good strategic plan is better. And so that's been something I've carried on in life. I'm happy to report that I did get in the 3rd time into CHAS, political science group, and I had a great outcome. I was charged as an out-of-state student at that point, but
We appreciate the
I'm pretty sure it went to good use.
Well,
Yeah.
that's a great story, and I know Cobleskill well. I spent a lot of time in upstate New York. So others that have experienced failure, anything that you want to jump on?
I'll
Get a
add to
chance?
that. I went to graduate school, got a master's degree in education, and thought I'd be an educator for my career. And I came to a point in time where I thought, I think I'm ready to do something different. I'm ready for a new environment, just ready for something different. So I went about the job search process, and it had been a long time since I'd entered that process. And so I jumped in, both feet in, and started applying to different institutions. And every opportunity, it was sort of like a closed door. Even the jobs that I thought, oh, this is me, they wrote this job description for me, closed door. And so I thought to myself, what is happening? So what I did is took some time, stepped back, and tried to refocus on my why. Like, why am I doing this? And what do I actually really want? What am I really good at? What's the right next step for me? Not the obvious next step. And when I did that, I shifted my search in a totally different direction and ended up outside of education and landed in a wonderful place. And so what I learned from that is sometimes I go about the process of just doing what's always been done or doing what's expected. But sometimes there's some value in stepping back and saying, let me turn the mirror to myself and let me ask myself some really hard questions about what do I want and what's best for me. And I usually end up making a better decision that way.
And I had a similar experience, and I'll share this because I know that we have some students that are watching. I went to Furman, as I shared before, for undergrad, and at the time Furman was, I think, #2 in the nation for chemistry. And I initially went to college to be a medical doctor because I promised my grandmother that, and I just thought that was the way to do it. And
You also promised, well, you told us you were going to be a doctor.
a doctor, right? And
You didn't specify what kind.
right, exactly. So I still kept my promise, okay? And so my freshman year, I took chemistry, and I didn't fail it, but I did not make the grade that I needed to continue down the pre-med track. And with that experience, it was shocking to, come to that experience, but at the same time, I was involved in service learning. And so I was working with Big Brother, Big Sisters and loved serving students. That was something new for me, a new experience, and I just loved it, and I wanted to do more of that. And so I founded a mentoring program for middle school girls and fell in love with youth development as a field. And at the time, Furman had a program where you could design your own major. And so I designed my major with the committee, and it was youth development, intercultural youth development. And so from that experience, I learned that the failure that I had with the course in my initial plan really set me up for my career. I fell into this field because of that failure. And I guess I will call it a redirection to purpose. What I'm doing now is definitely my purpose and definitely my passion. And so it was unintentional, but it definitely set me up for success. And so I think that's resilience as well.
It is resilience. Look, today's a rapidly changing world. I mean, I just, maybe I'm just getting too old. I think it's time to, go and sit down in the lazy boy for a while because things are moving so quickly. And in this environment, you know, how do you envision the role of resilience in the future of leadership? I mean, how are you preparing for the changes that you know the organization that you lead will have to confront? And this is really open. So Candace, do you want, I'm going to come all the way down.
Come on over.
All right, here we go.
All right. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that our future leaders, if they're going to be successful, they have got to get a good handle on this resilience. And I think one of the ways that we help them do that is to normalize what we just talked about. That there are going to be times when you are faced with a situation and you know exactly what to do and it gives you the outcome that you want. Congratulations. But there are also going to be times when you don't know what to do. And there are going to be times that what you try doesn't work. And when that happens, bring that to me. Let's talk through it. Let's help you understand what has happened. So I think one of the things we do is we normalize this process that Kritsine talked about, where we try this and it works, or we try it and it doesn't work. It's normal and it's okay. And so I think one of the ways that we prepare future leaders is to normalize that process of success and sometimes failure or redirection, and help them frame it in a way that is healthy and productive.
I think it's critical for me as a university leader and our faculty to understand that clearly, because our students need to build that sense of resiliency through understanding failure, understanding how to react to it, how to pivot, and how to go back to your North Star and really understand what you're trying to achieve.
I think that's where, like, we go back to the first question as well. When I looked up resilience, the meaning, the definition of resilience, and it is after you bend or have been altered in some way, you come back to center, right? And I think, like, for future leaders, it's how can you step into the vulnerability of, I don't know, or of, I'm off of my North Star, or I'm not clear on my why right now. And then how do you come back, right? Because the challenges that we are facing right now are so complex, they're so big, that we're never going to get it right all the time, right? If we are committed to perfection in all that we do, we're going to stop the work before the work is done, right? And so I think it's like, how do we make that really clear to our future leaders that it's going to be hard, you're going to get it wrong, you're not going to be able to understand this whole situation, you're not going to be able to understand this entire challenge, but we still want you to show up tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's resilience.
Patrick?
Well, no, I was just thinking, you know, there's some saying that there's no new neat thing under the sun, right? When I spent some time in the drone industry, about a decade, we technologically were outstripping the governing bodies, right? We had this great tech that we were developing to go do amazing things, but the government hadn't quite figured out how to manage it, legislate it, and as sometimes happens, the government will, when they don't understand a thing, stop it. And so what we did was, I led teams down to Latin America, went to other places outside of the US to prove the theories, to demonstrate the value, and to bring those learnings back to the US to say, hey, look, done the right way, we have an opportunity to make this a real fulfilling part of society, right? And so you look today and the parallels with AI and how things are just tremendously advancing. And you look at how there's uncertain times economically and politically, but it's important for those future leaders to recognize that that flexibility, being able to get back to the North Star, is something to cultivate. It's something to appreciate, and I think organizations are probably going to, more than ever, start to look to hire that into their workforce. Folks that can do that. You want folks that you have confidence in steering, but you want them to be able to steer with a light touch, right? And so I imagine you experience that on the regular.
I do. So what strategies have each of you implemented in your workplace to foster resilience within your team or the overall organization? I mean, Kritsine, you talked about a strategy that I'm really intrigued by, where you have this iterative process. Are there other examples of that some of you have experienced in your own organization that are intentional in building resilience? I mean, the focus is to build resilience within the organization and your teams. That's a
Well,
tough question.
it is.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a very symbolic person,
Okay.
and so I like to use real life situations to explain things. So for resilience, I have two. So do you all remember the toy? I guess it was a clown. I remember it being a clown, but it's like a boxing thing, and it had a weight at the bottom, and you punch it, and it lays flat, but then it bounces right back up.
Oh yeah.
And to
Yeah, I love
me,
that.
so that's a symbol that I use with within teams, because I feel like that truly is resilience. And sometimes, when you're punched down or you experience an unforeseen challenge or circumstance, it can knock the wind out of you, and it may take you time to get back up and to recover, but you will get back up and recover. And then the second symbol that I use, I'm a houseplant mom. I don't know if I'm the only one, but okay. And so with that, one is
You adopt
pruning.
house
Houseplants
Are
from
you-
Lowe's and Home Depot.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
So I
God
just
told me
wanted to
was
know
the-
if I had some extra where to.
Yes, I'll take them.
Okay.
But there's a process of pruning in gardening. And
Oh, there's a metaphor here. I'm
yes,
sorry. Yeah, I'm a
symbolic.
horticulturalist, so you had me. I was ready to go deep,
Oh.
but okay.
This is kind of deep, but I don't know how deep. Okay, so, with the process of pruning, which I'm sure you're very familiar with
It
that.
turns out I am.
As a horticulturalist, for the plant or, whatever you're cutting, that experience of cutting back or taking away can be painful in the moment, right? But ultimately, you're setting the plant up for greater growth, greater longevity, sustainability, et cetera. And so I think for me as a leader, I've used those two metaphors or symbols to demonstrate that, hey, what we're experiencing, it may hurt temporarily, but in the long run, it will set us up for success.
Well, I was just thinking that how do you now in our organizations, not symbolically but practically address the times? And so transparency, open communication, and then frequent touch back to the teams. And I'm talking everybody from the front line to the C-suite, right? If you don't know that there's a problem, you can't address it. And sometimes if people don't feel comfortable bringing the problem forward, it can, fester until it's gotten too big. So strategically building in those touch points into your leadership, and making sure that you're doing those things within the organization, I think, is something that you can actually practically apply.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I think things like flexible work hours, generous leave policies, paid parental leave, those are really practical, tangible ways that enable people to have the space they need to collect themselves to show up well for the work. I think sometimes we want to get grandiose in how we think about resilience within our culture, and a lot of it are the small policy changes that really support our team members and their well-being.
And speaking of practical, I think one way that we sort of try to foster resilience is through very practical classes. Like, some people actually need to learn the skill of resilience. What does it mean? How do I do this? For some of us, we've learned that through our experiences, and we can point to that. But some folks need like skill building. And so in our organization, we commit to that. We commit to providing people with opportunities to sit in a space, have a facilitated discussion around research-based topics. How do you build resilience? And for some people, that language speaks to them, right? More than, the bozo clown or the plant, right? So you kind of meet people where they are. And so that's one of the approaches that we've taken.
Well, we've had a great conversation. One of the things that we pride ourselves on in the Shelton Center is the work that we do with students. And at the end of the day, we're a university that has 38,000 students that we're trying to prepare for their personal and professional life. And so as you think about the students that are watching today and thinking about young people that are just beginning their careers, what advice do you have for our new employees, our current students, about how to build resilience in their personal and professional lives. And this has been a theme of conversation throughout the day, but if we can end on this really pointed conversation about, what do young people need to do? And I use young in, quotes around it, but what do people that are just beginning their careers or still in school, what tactics should they employ to really build resiliency and be prepared for the workforce?
So many things are coming to mind. I think the biggest thing to mention is that you should breathe. Whenever you have those experiences that take the breath away from you, that take the wind out of you, it can be overwhelming. And that is very real. It's a very real emotion, a very real feeling, and that's natural. So give your space to feel all of that. Check in with your village, your support system. If you're on campus, we have supports at NC State or whichever university you're attending, but check in with your advisors, your peers, your colleagues if you're a professional, and see what kind of supports. My peers here have mentioned several supports that they've implemented within their organizations. And so check in and see what's available to support you as you navigate and work through this experience. And ultimately, just like Bozo the Clown, you will get back up. Sometimes it's a quick recovery, sometimes it takes time, and sometimes you may need some help, someone to pick you back up, but you can get back up. And so that's what I would want to make sure that you can get back up.
It's a great story, great lesson. And I think that, it's in our current state of affairs across our country, young people in particular are really struggling with their mental health and their well-being. And building resilience is such a critical tool to help people overcome, the challenges that we all face. And, building community and having a village is such a critical thing for our students, for young people in general. And so thank you for sharing that. Kritsine, anything?
I just want to piggyback off what you said because it's so important that what I would say to young people is you're gonna get it wrong. Like you're gonna fail. You're probably gonna have a massive career pivot where you end up doing something wildly different than you thought you were gonna do. I have done that. And there's an opportunity in that to redefine yourself, to say, this is who I want to be moving forward, right? And there's opportunity in that to reach out and like lean into those connections. When I work with young people now, I hear a lot of, I want to do everything, and I want to do everything really well. And especially for students at all of our universities across North Carolina, like they probably have done everything to get into college. And I think like you can't do everything your whole life, right? And so you're gonna have to have people around you who support you, and you're gonna have to have that grace with yourself, how we started the conversation. I think that's what I would say.
Everything does become more complicated as we move forward. Yeah, doing everything, that is.
Yeah.
Patrick?
My brother's a former police officer. I have a lot of good friends who are on the job here in Raleigh. And, the cops, they get tased before they're able to deploy a taser so that they can feel what it's like to get shocked, right? The more that you're able to anticipate what that's going to feel like, the more that you make peace with that. If you can make peace with that earlier in your career and recognize it's okay to fail, it's okay to get knocked down. And then to really listen to the recurring theme that I think we're talking about here, which is that a knockdown doesn't mean it's a knockout, right? If you can do that sooner in your career, it allows you to get up a little faster each time. It allows you to pause and reflect and realize whether or not you need to make that career pivot, or seek out that community to help you through what's next. But the quicker that you can make your peace with that and recognize from mental health that it's okay to have that moment, the better off you're going to be long term.
Yeah, well said. Candace?
I would just say you're not alone. I can remember being a younger woman and feeling very isolated when I didn't perform the way I was expected to perform, or things didn't turn out the way I thought they would turn out, and felt very alone and felt like I had to figure it all out for myself. And I came to learn that I don't, and none of us does. And so my advice is just a reminder that you're not alone, that there are people around you, people that you know who want to help you, and people that you haven't even met yet who are there expressly for the purpose of helping you and supporting you. So I would just remind you that you're not alone and encourage you to reach out.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your participation in this session and the insights you provided, which I'm sure will inspire all of us. In closing, I'd like to express our collective gratitude for the dedication, innovation, and spirit that the Shelton Leadership Center brings to our institution and to the broader community. This partnership fuels progress and inspires a generation of leaders ready to make their mark on the world. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn the session back over to Debbie. Debbie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chancellor Woodson, and all of our guests for this fantastic conversation. Today's speakers have been absolutely amazing, right? I get so excited and energized every year. I hope you do too.